Hello and welcome to today's Title IX Talk hosted by the ODAC. My name is Myra Sims. I am happily retired now, but spent an almost 40-year career in college athletics, served as both a head volleyball coach and a head basketball coach for about 18 years, and then spent the last 16 or so years as an administrator and was an AD at a couple of different ODAC institutions. So I'm happy to be here with two esteemed colleagues, and I will ask them to introduce themselves before we start talking a little bit about officiating.
Go ahead, Vickie.
Good morning. My name is Vickie Van Kleeck. I have a background in both officiating and coaching and college administration. Started out in softball and basketball at the high school level. Was an ODAC official for many years, and am currently the supervisor of officials for women's basketball for the ODAC. I also coached college softball for over 30 years. Was a senior women's administrator at Ferrum College and retired from Ferrum in June of 2015. Currently still assigned ODAC officials, and I am also the NCAA softball rules editor.
Hi, I'm Melissa Wiggins, and I've spent a boatload of years coaching both basketball and college lacrosse. I started officiating when I was in high school. Softball was my first sport. I got more into officiating working with George Tolliver at JMU when I was in grad school, and I did softball, high school softball, and college basketball. Then I went into the coaching world, stayed in that for a while, coached at the college level, both Division I and Division III, served as a senior women's administrator at Randolph, and I'm now currently a Division I, II, III, and high school lacrosse official, and an administrator as an athletic director at a kindergarten through 8th grade school.
Great. Thank you both for being here today. Obviously, we've all been celebrating the 50th anniversary of Title IX over this last year, and the ODAC has put together a number of these programs to commemorate and highlight Title IX. Today, we're talking about officiating. And so let's get started by talking about what you all have seen as far as opportunities that have been created for women in officiating, either directly or indirectly as a result of Title IX.
I think there are more opportunities. I'd like to see more women involved in women's sports. Nothing aggravates me more than a final and there are men involved. No disrespect to the men out there that officiate our sport, but I feel like we need to have those opportunities for women. It pleased me at this last Final Four for women's basketball that it was an all-female crew, despite perhaps some of the criticism that was involved in that. But that's okay, because that's part of the business. When you put a striped shirt on, you can fully expect to receive criticism. That's how that works. If you go into officiating, it's a whole nother story. When I went from coaching into reffing, my friend said I went to the dark side, and that might very well be. But I also feel like my combination of coaching and reffing give me a better rapport with coaches on the sideline. So that helps a lot. I understand what they're doing. I understand it's their livelihood. I'm glad to see that women are in the NBA, in the NFL. I'm sorry that I was born too soon. I would love to have officiated football. So there's some of those things that I enjoy seeing women in our era right now, taking advantage of Title IX and being at every level they possibly can be.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, when I got into high school basketball officiating and high school softball umpiring, fortunately, I was in Northern Virginia, which had a little bit more of a progressive atmosphere there, but you still were in the minority. I know that, when you looked at developmental officiating camps that were hosted in the summer, I never went to one because they were all men, and I just felt too intimidated to do that. Whereas now, there are camps and that, not specifically for women, but they're women's basketball teaching camps. So the opportunities have just expanded immensely.
I'm glad you brought that up, Vickie, because I remember when I was working ref in high school basketball, when I was also coaching at UVA, and I think I was one of 3 women on that board. And one of the first games I went to couldn't find my partner anywhere, and he was back talking to the AD in the office. He walked out, he looked at me, and he goes, "Oh my God, they sent me a girl." To which my eyebrows got stuck to the top of my head, and I looked at him and I said, "Welcome to the 20th century, sir." And it's still, still the numbers aren't great. Like in my area, because I'm now an athletic director, I see very few women still And when I talk to them about joining that basketball, especially basketball, it seems like right now there's probably about 100 officials and there might be 10 women. So in my mind, our numbers are still incredibly low and would love to see more of that, more women involved. And I encourage all the young kids that I'm around every day, become a ref. It's awesome.
And I think
I'm sorry, Vickie, go ahead.
I just think, especially here at the high school level, like I live in Roanoke, and the women tend to get, they're stuck at the JV level. It takes them much longer to progress up to doing a varsity game than it does the male. And I think the lack of upward mobility it burns them out, and they get frustrated and say, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I think.
Why do you think that is, Vickie, that the women progress more slowly? Do you have any ideas on that?
Sexist cultural norms for women. I mean,
I think the men do the assigning.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's awful. I mean, I see guys doing high school games around here that I'm sorry, they are not fit. They cannot get up and down the floor. Even when I did it, having coached women's college basketball for 20 years, when I went into officiating, I was doing middle school and JV games. And it was insulting.
Right.
But it's pardon the old school term, it's the good old boys who do the assigning. And therefore it's like, I had one guy say to me, God, you're really fast. Well, yeah, because I'm not out of shape. I can get up and down the floor. And so that was the frustration. And I think that's like Vickie said, I think women get into it and they don't get anywhere. They might get a JV game. And then you look up and you see a guy who cannot get up and down the floor and you wonder how he's getting that game over you. And it goes back to the assigner. I'm sorry. It goes back to the assigner. No disrespect intended, Vickie. I'm not throwing all assigners under the bus. Just what I know from what I deal with in my space here in Lynchburg.
And I think that's one thing that has changed with officiating, because, it used to be the expectation was to be a college official, you had to go through the high school ranks. And now in women's college basketball, we would rather take them where they are without learning any other mechanics or bad habits. I have a ODAC women's camp at Easter Mennonite every year. And unlike any other camps that I have ever been to, we are 50% women, and they're coming out of Virginia and I do not know these young women. And it's been a real great recruiting process for us, but basketball is a little bit different. Basketball is different. In softball, collegiate softball, we do not have hardly any female officials. And I think that is more of the cultural norms in that sport than in women's basketball.
And then lacrosse.
As I was preparing for this, I saw that, and this was from 21-22, that there were 800, and I talk about basketball because that was the sport I coached the longest, but of the 800 women's basketball referees at the NCAA level in 21-22, that 43% of those were female. And I just wonder, is that percentage going up or down, or do you know, either of you?
Was that for a particular sport?
That was for basketball across all divisions.
Yeah. And I think basketball has done a much better job of equaling their numbers out. It's a different environment in basketball than softball, I think, for women to go into. But I think the numbers are pretty accurate from what I can tell from, looking at different staffs and turning on TV and seeing a vast number of female officials now. And that's, young women need role models. They need mentors. And that's the only way we're going to be able to recruit, is by seeing someone on TV or someone at your local high school, performing at a high level and saying, hey, I can do that too.
Well, that's one of the things when I was coaching at JMU, I brought Dee Cantner in to speak to our basketball camp.
Oh, yeah.
She talked about her travels all over the world, and I'm trying to encourage them more. The challenge that we have in getting young officials is the parents. If you can get them, Vickie, away from youth sports and take them right into college, you have a greater chance of keeping that official. I train lacrosse officials from the high school kids to college officials. Young officials who are trying to go up in status in lacrosse. And we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to skip a step, if you will, and try to take these young lacrosse players who are graduating right now. We have like a college accelerated program where we put them in because they know the game so well. and they're also young and fit, that we can help teach them the game, but nothing beats experience. And so that's our conundrum. That's our challenge, is our game has gotten very fast. Lacrosse has gotten very, very fast. The rules have changed a lot, and there's a lot. Basketball, you've got 94 feet. We're covering 120 yards with 3 officials, 120 by 60, and a whole bunch of people. And so there's a lot to be said about trying to get the young people in it. But parents, I'm really strict in my school. They're not allowed to speak to officials. If they do, they go. And I think that's our biggest, I think for basketball especially, because everyone is a basketball ref. Everyone knows all the rules in basketball.
We've probably had 5 young females come out of the college game to our camp and go directly into officiating, and so successful, so good at it because they understand the game from having.
Right.
I mean, now, Division III is your developmental stage, but those 4 or 5 of those women have just gone straight up to Division I.
Well,
so hard to keep them at Division III, but that's your job, is to develop and train them.
Right.
well, we wanted to touch on just a little bit about the pay issue in at officiating women's sports, and then the corresponding men's sports. So men's basketball, women's basketball, men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse. Can you all talk a little bit about that? What you see happening as far as pay equity?
I know that a number of years ago, we had a little bit of a showdown for lacrosse. The men were getting paid more for doing the same thing at the high school level. And I really pushed our assigner who assigns high school. I said, why are we making less than the guys are making for the exact same game? This is ridiculous. And I get the no, don't well me. It should be, we're doing the same game. We're all out there on the same field. We're working 100 yards, 120 yards. The pay should be equal. I think that we're pretty equal in the ODAC and as far as officials getting paid the exact same thing for men's and women's lacrosse. Women's lacrosse is a little bit different because we are supply and demand. So there's very few of us. I mean, I could work every day of the week, if I was retired and I was 30 years younger. But the equity is pretty good on the lacrosse side of things. I don't know. I can't speak to Division I, but I think it's pretty close.
And I think at all divisions, I think it's fairly equal. I mean, I applaud Brad Bankston, the commissioner of the ODAC, for making that a priority for our officials. And at Division I, especially after 2 years ago, when we had that situation with women's basketball in Texas, where the facilities and the perks and everything that the men were getting versus what the women were getting were not equal. Well, gender equity has been on the table at the NCAA. So from their perspective, they have, matched the pay for postseason umpires, postseason basketball officials. Everybody's making the same. And I think a lot of conferences are equal in that regard too. I'm not exactly sure. I think there are some, the men still get some perks or might get a little bit more money than the women do. But I think the topic has opened up and so people aren't going to stand for less pay, if you're a woman than a man's getting.
And there's some disparity from conference to conference.
Yeah.
In Division I lacrosse. Like I'll do an ACC game is going to pay me way more than a Big South game or so there's definitely disparity between the conferences, but I think in terms of gender, it's the same. If you're a man reffing women's lacrosse or a woman, now the men's are a little bit different. I have spoken to other, I'm always curious what other refs make, talking to a baseball umpire, like what do you make at the ACC per game compared to what we make for a lacrosse game? So it is a little interesting, and I'm not sure it's equitable all the way around. And considering, I always give him a hard time. He's a good friend. I said, you guys stand still. I said, we're running like 5.5 miles. We should get 20.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, Melissa, because that's what I was going to point out in case there was anybody watching that didn't realize that during the regular season, officials' fees are set by the individual conferences. So there can be some difference from conference to conference. I guess as we think about the current landscape, aside from pay disparity, and obviously that has been somewhat addressed as we've discussed, what other challenges do you all see for women in officiating right now?
I think the age-old challenge is just getting your foot in the door and proving yourself. It's as if we have to do the job twice as good, twice as better than the male official. We have to prove ourselves. You know, everybody challenges. I've been challenged so much as an official, but based on my gender. You know, you don't know the rules. Then you recite the rule book to them, and it's usually a guy who's challenging your knowledge of the rules. And then when you come back to them, they're like, oh, wow, yes, we are knowledgeable. We're not going into this blind or ignorant. And so I think, again, those are our challenges. It's still, despite the fact that sometimes I smack myself and go, are we in 2023? Because I feel like we're in 1975, right at the time when Title IX came into existence. When you work with that same gender stereotype, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a woman. And you guys both know we've been women in sport our entire lives. And in my entire life in athletics, still to this day, I am challenged by men because they don't think I know what I'm talking about. And that's the greatest frustration. And I think you have to have some good self-confidence and a little bit of backbone and a sense of humor going into this profession, going into officiating. You've got to know that you're up against a wall that's very different than what the men go into. You assume if you're a guy, you know everything there is to know about sport. Because as I jokingly say that boys get balls and girls get dolls. And so as a result, there's that stereotype that thinks we don't know what we're talking about because we're a woman and we're in sport, even in 2023. I wish it had changed more, and it has changed. Don't get me wrong, it's changed a lot, but we still have growth. We still have a lot of growth.
Yeah, I think some of the challenges are like, just still the cultural stereotype of, should a woman be officiating? I think you look at, some people can't put up with spectator harassment. I mean, it's real, it's out there. And, young women today don't want to be, yelled at by, parents and fans and everything. And then I think, just the other thing is just, they have to have mentors. I think that's so important. One thing we do at our camp, instead of just plugging names into, halls to fill games, we actually, have a team, and a Division I, very successful Division I official has that team for the 3 or 4 days. And it's a mentoring program. That's what we're trying to establish, that they have somebody, that you can reach out to as a mentor. And I think that's key. If you get out on this officiating track by yourself and you don't have any support, you don't have someone you can call, review film with, and do that type of thing, it can be overwhelming for you.
We do that in lacrosse too. We're offered that opportunity and to mentor a young and up and coming official so that they can call you after they've had a coach, chew their backside off or whatever it is. And watch film, because having been a basketball coach, my majority of my time in athletics, I love watching film. So I don't mind breaking down film with the young official, saying, okay, look at your positioning here. Tell me what you saw there. Could this have been the call you could have made? And then just listening, even other folks my age, we've been in the game, we call each other up. Well, what crazy thing happened in your game today? What crazy thing did a coach say to you today? And so those are the things. It's like Vickie said, you got to have a little bit of a backbone, because you are going to get yelled at. People have lost their minds, and so they're gonna yell from the stand. So you have to kind of go into it knowing that you've got to not have rabbit ears. You've got to let that conversation go.
Yeah. I don't think people understand what the commitment for officiating is these days, because you go through the season, and then like she was talking about film. If an official at any sport doesn't review film, video, which is accessible to every college official now, they're not going to get any better. So they go from the season, and then they go to at least 1, 2, maybe 3 camps during the summer, which is a financial investment, a time investment. And we start back in the fall. The ACC started these study groups. They start in September, and they meet once a week, and they go through the whole entire rule book. They review film and everything, and culminate with taking the exam, the test. But it's not a part-time commitment anymore. Of course, a lot of them these days, that's their full-time job, and they're very successful at it, and were able to retire from what they were doing besides officiating.
Yeah, I think Vickie's right. I think that's a point. You think about, I don't just walk out onto the field and pop a whistle in my mouth. We run in a Division I game between 5 and 6 miles a game. So it's fitness. It's all year long. It's not just knowing the rules, but it's staying fit, passing a fitness test. And like Vickie said, we have clinics during the summer. We're training young officials. Lacrosse has become year round. We have a traditional season now, but I also referee in the fall, and I've refereed field hockey, and I've refereed softball and refereed basketball. So, you know, right now my main focus is lacrosse, but there's a commitment. There's a rules commitment, understanding the game. I like that idea, Vickie, of starting the study groups. I think that'd be something that we could steal from in lacrosse. We do these things. We have you make the call. We have a whole bunch of different things that come week to week, but it's nice. Our game has become incredibly complicated, and I've been trying to get them to steal some things from basketball and put them in lacrosse. So hopefully we will, you know, the flagrant one foul, some things like that, that now that our game has become more physical, I think we need some more deterrence to crime, if you will. And so I think we can borrow from basketball. I think we can learn a lot from basketball.
I often encourage, you know, when I got into working with the NCAA with softball, you know, and saw the status of where softball officials were compared to basketball, women's basketball officials, I tried to talk to them about developing that model. Let's see what basketball's done. I mean, and most everyone has been amenable to that. But they've just done a great job of developing their officiating staff, and other sports are not as, you know, at that level of development now.
I know we would all like to see more young women getting into officiating, so I would encourage anybody listening, current or former athletes who are interested. I'm sure Vickie and or Melissa would be glad to hear from you to talk about their particular sports: basketball, lacrosse, officiating, softball officiating. But I want to thank you both for your time today. I hope this has been enlightening. I've enjoyed hearing your all's thoughts and your experiences, and I appreciate your time. And we thank everybody who takes the time to listen to this.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.